So what does it actually mean to grow up these days? The classic milestones, college, a career, getting married, having kids, they're all still there, but the timeline, the whole rule book has been completely rewritten. Okay, let's dive in and see how the journey into adulthood has totally transformed over the last 3 decades.
So this is the big question we're tackling, right? Is it really harder to become an adult today, or is it just different? To get to the bottom of it, we've got to look at the data.
And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're turning back the clock to the early 1990s and putting that generation right next to the young adults of today. And the findings from the Pew Research Center, well, they're pretty eye-opening.
First things first, let's talk education, because this is one of the biggest, most dramatic shifts we've seen, and honestly, it sets the stage for pretty much everything else.
I mean, just look at this jump. Back in 1993, only about a quarter of people in their late 20s had a bachelor's degree. Fast forward to today, and that number has shot up to a whopping 40%. That is a massive, massive increase.
But who's really driving this change? When you dig into the numbers, a really clear and powerful trend emerges that has totally reshaped what a college campus looks like.
And yeah, this chart says it all. 30 years ago, you can see young men and women were getting degrees at basically the same rate. They were neck and neck. But look at today. The share of young women with a degree has more than doubled, soaring from 23% all the way to 47%. They haven't just caught up, they've sprinted way ahead.
Okay, so today's young adults are way more educated. That must mean they're doing better financially, right? Well, yes and no. And this brings us to what you could call the great economic trade-off of being a young adult today.
All right, so first, the good news. More of them are working full-time. The rate for 25 to 29-year-olds has climbed from 60% up to 65%. That's a solid improvement, and a big part of that is more women joining the full-time workforce.
And with more education and more people in full-time jobs comes higher pay. After you adjust for inflation, the median young adult in this age group is earning over $7,000 more each year than someone their age did back in 1993. That's a real, tangible gain.
But, and this is a really big but, this is where the story gets a whole lot more complicated. That progress, that extra cash in their paychecks, it's definitely not free. It comes with a new and much, much heavier financial burden.
And there it is. The median student loan debt for this age group has just skyrocketed. For every $7,000 in extra pay, there's an extra $10,000 in student debt. And remember, that's adjusted for inflation. So basically, that entire pay raise and then some is getting eaten up by the cost of the education it took to get that job. And it's not just student loans either. This table really paints the picture. The median student loan balance has ballooned from around $6,000 to $16,000. And for those who actually manage to buy a home, the median mortgage is nearly $60,000 higher than it was for their parents. The financial pressure is really coming from all sides.
So if you're spending more years in school and you're starting out with a much heavier debt load, what does that do to all those other big life milestones? Well, it's probably no surprise that the traditional timeline for starting a family has been completely rewritten.
Let's start with the baseline from 30 years ago. In 1993, if you were between 25 and 29, it was basically a coin flip whether you were married, 50-50. For half of all young adults, marriage was a milestone they'd already checked off the list.
Now jump back to today. That married slice of the pie has shrunk a lot, all the way down to just 29%. What was once a totally common experience for this age group has now become the exception.
Pew Research puts it plainly. It's a drop from 50% down to 29%. And that's not just a statistic, It fundamentally changes the social fabric, the expectations for young people, and it has a huge ripple effect on the next major milestone.
And yeah, that ripple effect is parenthood. It's not just about things being delayed, it's a whole reordering of life's priorities. For folks in their late 20s, there's been a massive 17 percentage point drop in the number who have a child at home. And a change that big impacts everything from the economy to our family structures. So all of this leads to a really practical, simple question. If fewer young people are starting their own households, where are they living while they navigate this new, much longer path to adulthood?
Well, the answer for many of them is back in their childhood bedroom. Among 18 to 24-year-olds, a clear majority now live with their parents, 57%, which is up from 53% back in 1993. It's a really logical adaptation to the financial pressures of student debt and a delayed start to a career and family.
Okay, so let's zoom out. What's the big picture here?
When you put all these different pieces together, a whole new portrait of modern adulthood starts to emerge. Here's the new playbook for adulting, if you will. On one hand, today's young adults are more educated and earn more money than their parents did. But on the other hand, they are carrying historic levels of debt. That, in turn, pushes traditional milestones like getting married and having kids further and further down the road. And it makes living at home with your parents a much more common choice.
So the bottom line is this. That journey to adulthood just isn't the simple, straight line it might have seemed to be for older generations. It's now more like a really complex map, full of financial trade-offs, new personal choices, and a timeline that is way more flexible, and maybe a lot more stressful than ever before.
And that leaves us with one final question to chew on. If this is how much has changed in the last 30 years, what on earth will adulthood even look like in another 30 years? Will these trends just keep going, or will a totally new path emerge all over again?